Hello and welcome to our channel. In today's episode, we shall talk about approaches to analyze different stakeholder constituencies involved in any project and how to manage them. Now, in any project, the principal investigator has to have certain skills or certain activities to be done. First is whenever the project lands, that means here a research project that lands on comes to the lab. The PI must understand what kind of requirements are there that must be met by the project deliverables. That means in terms of product or service, what exactly the requirements are that would be met. Who are the key stakeholders? And we shall be talking a bit about these stakeholders approaches in detail as we proceed with the video. What kind of engagement strategy must be deployed to keep the stakeholders on board? See, if you have stakeholders, they must be managed. They must be managed in a way that satisfies the project's purpose. And at the end of the project, the stakeholders must be happy with whatever experience or product or service they get out of it, right? Now, once a communication or engagement strategy has been deployed, the PI must ensure that the deliverable is of optimum quality, is delivered on schedule as per the requirements and within the allocated budgets, and with using whatever resources were available to that project. And of course, by managing the different risks or contingencies that may arise and lead to a revision of the scope of the project. So all these things have to be taken care by the PI to ensure that the project is optimally completed with the submission of a product or service, right? Now, in this entire process, the PI has to be the face of the project, of the research project. The principal investigator has to be the face of the research project and be absolutely accountable to the different stakeholders. Now, what exactly are the stakeholders then? Stakeholders could be an individual or a group or an organization that may be able to impact the project's course or its outcome, or may be impacted by the project's course and its outcome, or the decisions or activities that would be done during the project. So these are very dynamic relationships that need to be managed. So for example, in a research project, the funder is a stakeholder. The internal team, the internal stakeholders are your team members. The external stakeholder is the funder. The institution is a stakeholder. There could be other colleagues in the department or collaborators who are again stakeholders, or even the end users for whom the product is being designed. They are also the stakeholders. So there are so many stakeholders that need to be managed. How do we go about it? Let's look at certain grids or certain models of stakeholder engagement. Now, there are some common matrices that people follow. We'll classify them as 2D and 3D matrices. 2D matrices, like two-dimensional matrices, will have two arms. Here you can see there is this arm, and then there is this particular arm here. And these are these are simple models and applicable for relatively smaller, simpler projects. The common ones are power. And here you have your interest. Now, people do different types of combinations here. So at times, when we say power, we can also say it's a power interest model or an influence impact model, or even a power impact model. So there are different combinations, but more or less the strategies are the same. Now, what are the strategies here? Suppose we're looking at here in this particular box quadrant, we have high power and high interest. This is the group of stakeholder that must be managed very closely. So here we have to manage closely. In this quadrant, we have stakeholders who have very high power, but they're not as much interested in the project. So there may be very senior people, leadership, who are not as keenly interested with the project at the moment. They may be interested later on, but at the moment they are very powerful, but not as much engaged or interested in your project's outcome. Here, we need to just keep them satisfied. Like, we don't want to be on the wrong side with them, and we need to keep them satisfied, right? In this quadrant, we have people who have very high impact, but relatively low power. We need to keep them informed, because if you don't keep them informed, then what happens is they may just become very anxious. So they have a lot of interest in your project, but they do not have as much power. Now, this is a group where you have people who, stakeholders who are relatively less in terms of power and also less in terms of interest. They're just like staff who run errands. They're not interested in the overall success of the project, neither would they be as much powerful in influencing the outcome. Here, you need to monitor them closely, right? So what kind of approaches are we taking here? First is we have just classified them according to the power and impact. This could be done at the start of the project and again revisited from time to time because relationships are dynamic, they keep changing. Maybe initially you want people who are very powerful to get all the, suppose you're launching a multi-site project, you need to go to different states and need to collect data. You need state clearances or union clearances. At that point, you may want to have very powerful people engaged with you. So you need to influence them. You need to increase their interest in your project and at the same time build on their power. So you need to manage them closely at that point of time. Once that is done, they may just shift from this quadrant to this quadrant and you need to keep them satisfied. The other one is like when you have multi-year, multi-stakeholder, too many dimensions to the project, it gets a bit complicated. It is no longer just a 2D model, it becomes a 3D model. Let's go to the next one and see what a 3D model is. Now, these are 3D models of stakeholder engagement, and one of the common models is the Salience model. Salience, call it 3D because it is usually something like this, three-dimensional, right? Or now, what are the elements in a 3D model? The common elements in a 3D model are like we have here, we have power, we have urgency, and we have legitimacy. That means stakeholders who are very powerful, they can influence the course of the project or the outcome. Legitimacy means they are authentic people who deserve to be kept on board or engaged with during the project. And urgency is these people can ask for immediate action or at times create situations which require immediate attention from the principal investigator. Now, these are three circles which would overlap. Now, this is quite natural that the circle, that the common intersection is where your core stakeholders would lie, right? So these are important ones and you can't be without them. So you have to have some strategy to engage with them. But at the same time, you must also, one must also realize that there are other relationships that may pop up in this power, legitimacy, and urgency interplay in the Salience model. Stakeholders which fall in this category, they are latent stakeholders. That means they have a lot of power. They do not have legitimacy or urgency, but they're latent. If you stimulate them, then things could become difficult, right? You need to just manage them, like keep them satisfied sort of thing, right? Now, here we have people who are legitimate, but they do not have power or they cannot create urgency in terms of situation. These are discretionary stakeholders. That means you as the PI can decide how to engage with them, when to engage with them. At the same time, it's the same thing from their side as well. So these are discretionary, but then since these are legitimate stakeholders, you need to somehow have a strategy to keep them engaged. Here, you have stakeholders who meet the urgency criteria, but they are neither powerful nor they are legitimate. This group of stakeholders can be really demanding, right? So these are demanding stakeholders, and you should know when you need to cater to their demands or not cater to their demands. Because if you start playing to their demands unnecessarily, you may just be out of scope in terms of your project deliverables, or you may be resource intensive. So you need to understand whether the stakeholder, the demanding stakeholder meets the legitimacy and the power criteria or not. But if they do, then the strategy would change accordingly. Now, a powerful stakeholder who is also demanding but is not legitimate is a very dangerous stakeholder, right? You need to know that which stakeholder comes in this particular category of being dangerous, and be aware of this particular stakeholder, and you need special strategies to manage this group of stakeholders. If we look at the intersection here, we have a powerful and a legitimate stakeholder. That means this stakeholder is going to dominate the entire show. Possibly what you are trying to create, the product or the service that you're trying to create or deliver, uh, goes here. So this is a dominant stakeholder. May or may not create a sense of urgency, but at least has to be kept very happy, is powerful, and whatever role this particular stakeholder would play is legitimate. You can't question that role. Here, you have a stakeholder which is not powerful, but which creates urgency, and the urgency is quite legitimate. For example, in an emergency ward, you have a patient who presents with an emergency condition. And of course, the demand of service, immediate attention is legitimate, and there is an urgency also. But the patient may or may not have any power at that point of time. Here, this particular stakeholder is dependent on you, right? And as a good principal investigator, you have to take care of this dependency. So need to build on the trust elements, can't default here. Managing stakeholders in a project will determine how successful this project is completed. If you manage it well, and everyone is, like most of them are happy with whatever delivery you have, you get more business or good reputation. If not, then the relationship may go sour. Be careful in managing stakeholders. I hope this video was useful in giving some insights on how you could manage your stakeholders. Thank you so much for watching this through.